The auditorium fell completely silent. Not the polite silence of an audience waiting for a performance to begin. This was something else entirely. This was the silence of 3,000 people holding their breath at exactly the same moment, unsure of what they were witnessing, unsure if what stood before them was real. A 17-year-old boy had just walked onto the stage of Britain's Got Talent. No entourage. No stylist. No manager whispering last-minute instructions into his ear. Just a tall, quiet young man in a plain white shirt, his blonde hair falling slightly across his forehead, his blue eyes scanning the audience with an expression that was impossible to read. Calm. Almost dangerously calm. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. He had seen thousands of acts walk across that stage. Child prodigies. War veterans. Grieving widows. He had watched people pour their entire souls into 3 minutes of performance and still walked away unmoved. Simon Cowell did not get surprised. That was simply a fact the entertainment world had accepted long ago. But something made him sit up slightly straighter when this particular boy stepped to the microphone. The host asked for his name. Barron, he said quietly. Just that. One word. Someone in the audience laughed nervously. Someone else whispered something to the person beside them. The cameras caught Simon's face tightening almost imperceptibly. "And what are you going to perform for us today, Barron?" the host asked. The boy looked down for one long moment. Then he looked up, directly into the camera, directly into the eyes of everyone watching from home, and he said something that made the entire room go cold. "I'm going to sing something I wrote. About my country. About my father. About what I believe God is still doing in America." The silence that followed was not awkward. It was electric. Simon Cowell uncapped his pen and wrote nothing. He simply stared. The music began. A single piano. Slow, aching, devastatingly simple. And then Barron Trump opened his mouth and sang. The first note hit the room like a wave. Not because it was technically perfect, though it was close. Not because it was powerful in the way stadium voices are powerful. It was powerful the way a child crying in the dark is powerful. It was the sound of something completely unguarded, completely true. He sang about watching his father stand before crowds of millions, about watching a man absorb hatred and ridicule and still refuse to stop fighting. He sang about sitting in rooms full of noise and learning silence. He sang about praying in the early hours of the morning when no cameras were watching, when the name on the buildings outside meant nothing, when it was just a boy and whatever he believed was listening. He sang about America. Not a political America. Not a divided, screaming, headline-grabbing America. He sang about the America that exists in the spaces between arguments. The America of small towns where people still hold doors open for strangers. The America of a mother singing to a child who can't sleep. The America that people on every side of every debate secretly still believe in when no one is watching them perform their outrage. By the second verse, a woman in the third row was crying. By the bridge, half the audience was on their feet. Simon Cowell had not moved. His arms were still crossed. His face was still unreadable. But his pen had dropped onto the table without him noticing, and his jaw had tightened in the way it only ever tightened when something had genuinely reached him. The final chorus arrived like dawn breaking. Barron's voice climbed, not with the manufactured drama of a trained singer chasing a money note, but with the desperate sincerity of someone who actually meant every syllable, who had written these words at 2 a.m. when the weight of a last name felt too heavy to carry alone, who had put everything he could not say in public into 4 minutes of music and then walked onto the most watched stage in television history and given it away. God will make America great again. Not through power. Not through pride. Through the people who still believe. Through the quiet ones. Through the ones who pray when no one is watching. The last note faded. 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then the auditorium exploded. The standing ovation was immediate and total. People were screaming. People were hugging strangers beside them. The woman in the third row had stopped trying to wipe her tears. The judges, all four of them, were on their feet. All of them except Simon Cowell. He sat perfectly still in his chair, surrounded by the noise, looking at the boy on the stage. The boy who was not performing anymore. The boy who was simply standing there, eyes slightly red, breathing slowly, having just left something irreplaceable on that stage. Then Simon Cowell did something that the show's producers would later say they had never seen him do in all the years they had worked with him. He stood up slowly. He straightened his jacket. He pressed his hand flat against his chest, directly over his heart. And he nodded. Just once. A single, quiet, devastating nod. The cameras caught it. The internet would share it 40 million times before the week was over. That nod. From the man who had spent decades building walls of professional detachment to protect himself from being moved. Barron Trump had broken through every single one of them. When the noise finally quieted enough for Simon to speak, he leaned forward into his microphone. The room went silent again, hungry for whatever he was about to say. Simon looked at Barron for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, in a voice that did not sound like television at all. I don't know what your life has been like. I can only imagine. But I want you to know something. He paused. That was not a performance. That was a confession. And it was one of the most important things I have ever heard on this stage. He pressed the golden buzzer. And the gold fell like rain.